So I'd like to welcome everybody to our WebEx webinar, BTB Securities, presenting security assessments in the Defensible Security program. So if anybody has any questions, I just ask that you hold them to the end. You can either send them via the chat window. There's also a Q&A portion of this. Like I said, I'll be able to at least look at the chat window while I'm doing this. But if you could, wait till the end, I'll try to answer all of the questions at once. My name is Ron Schleck, and just to introduce BTB Security, I know we have some customers online and some people that have talked to us already. BTB Security was founded in 2006. We're a company focused strictly on information security and digital forensics. So we don't do any technology reselling, any other solutions, really. Just mainly focus on information security and digital forensics. As far as how we're structured, we do have 4 managing partners spread throughout the United States. You can see their names here: Brian Bailey, Chris McGinley, myself, Ron Schleck, and then also Stephen Gill. One of the things that you'll notice there is that we're pretty well credentialed. Obviously, we all adhere to CISSP as far as ethics. And then we've also gone through a lot of training and gained a certification for our CCE, which is a certified computer examiner, mainly for forensics. Just a little bit more about me. Again, my name is Ron Schleck. Been in the industry doing basically IT and security for 15 years. Really started even before I was out of college, but carried my passion through right to my professional career. Work experience, this is something to note. Worked at a couple different larger companies: Penn National Gaming, Harleysville Insurance, and also SunGuard Availability Services, and Ernst & Young. One of the nice things, and kind of with all of our experience here at BTB Security, is that we have a passion for consulting, and we've done this obviously for places like SunGuard Availability Services, and then myself at Ernst & Young. We have some other people who have Big Four experience. From the managing partner's perspective, it's important for us to not only have that consulting background, but then also sitting on the other side of the table. So it's something that we feel pretty strongly about, not only basically telling people what to do as far as consulting and helping people out, but again, being able to understand exactly what people need to be doing just because we've sat in those seats. We understand some of the challenges. For myself, one of the founders of BTB Security, sort of as the last note, I do enjoy long walks on the beach. Picture as sunsets from the grassy knoll, and of course, fine wine with a French foam. I was just looking for some filler there, so hopefully we'll start it off a little bit of a light note. Our services, a little bit of an eye chart here, just kind of goes to show that we do a little bit of everything underneath the sun as far as security and forensics. Heavy on the assessment side, as you can tell: penetration testing, vulnerability assessments, the whole way down to some very specific technology implementations. Then over on into integration, just basically helping people put things in place. We are completely vendor agnostic, so it's not like we resell any solutions, try to push people in a certain direction. We really like to sit down and figure out what things people actually need, and then try to fit the best solution for what their needs are. And then also forensics, which, as I always say, we're really good at breaking into places and assessing environments. It just makes sense that we're also good at forensics and doing incident response, and then training people on that. Now, just to start this off, one of the things that I like to kind of rely on every time we talk about the Defensible Security program, I always think of Ron Popeil, the Ronco inventions, the multiple Ronco inventions that he came up with.
I'll just walk over here. I'll put it in this new pro model. I'll slide it off. If you follow all the instructions material, you just...
So,
you know what? To follow all instructions, and you?
So when we talk about security, like I said, this is always something that pops into my mind because, we don't want a security program. And one of the things that I absolutely hate is people being just complacent with their security program and their overall organization. So you can't, pull the Ron Popeil, rotisserie oven and just set it and forget it. But it's something that you have to work on, continually work on. And this is something that we talk about, a notion of a defensible security program. Now, one of the things that I want to make clear is that when we say defensible security program, this is not legal defensibility, sort of like a strategy to build a security program and make decisions in light of legal obligations or potential legal action, but instead having the answer to no matter what regulatory changes, standards, or new buzzword trends tend to come up. So it's that constant work, being a little bit more of a strategic security person, looking a little bit ahead, doing things with a broad framework, and making sure that what you're doing, is defensible. So that down the road, if things change drastically, even with technology, you can go ahead and just fit right in. You're looked at as more of a leader in that space. Obviously, having a defensible security program, we all know the changes are in IT, and obviously a little bit faster in the IT security world. Things like the infrastructure changes. You have new vulnerabilities, almost daily, if not faster than that. We get different types of attacks from different places. And then, of course, we have our regulations. We don't tend to ever get that right, but we just keep throwing new laws and new regulations on top of ourselves here. And then also standards. They might be industry standards or standards that you work in through your own company. These things right here are why regular security assessments are so important. This is the type of stuff that you need to constantly be assessing. And we'll get into a little bit more of, why and the how and sort of how to get this stuff in motion. So I think it's important, before we get too far along, just to briefly touch on some of the types of assessments to ensure we're speaking a common language. We kind of take an approach that I think everybody can understand because we do provide external security assessments to organizations. We look at compliance and governance type assessments. Obviously, people are familiar with PCI, HIPAA, GLBA, basically the alphabet soup of compliance and regulatory matters. And then also from a standpoint of more of a governance model. So whether it be ISO, COBIT, COSO, or ITIL type frameworks that people work under. On the technical side, we're talking about things like vulnerability assessments, where we're getting a true landscape of all vulnerabilities in an organization through scanning and configuration reviews and interviews. Penetration testing, which the terminology sometimes gets mixed up. The terminology we like to use, or the view that we like to use, is that penetration testing is really that final exam that let's try to break into the environment and see what we can get access to as far as resources or data. And then some more specialized things like web application or application type of assessments. We can go, multiple levels down there. And then we get into more of the specific implementation assessments. Mobile applications, since they are a little bit more pervasive in our infrastructures now. BYOD, Firewall, database, virtualization, cloud, kind of right on down that path. So those are kind of how we look at it as far as breaking things out, as far as assessment types. So one of the other things that's kind of also good to touch on is the benefits of assessments. And I know that most of the people, I would hope at least that most of the people that have joined the conference know what the general benefits are of them. There's a long list of reasons why you want to do periodic assessments, and an equally long list of reasons why you should. I think an increasing number of organizations are bound by governmental regulations that dictate what they need to do and how they should be audited, going back to that HIPAA and PCI and FISMA and SOX. But there's also regular security posture assessments that go along with that, not just being in compliance with specific regulations, but then also taking stock in what you're doing beyond that. And that's what we're really talking about as far as an agnostic, sort of all-encompassing approach. But, at the same time, if you're not actually bound by any of those regulations, you still might want to consider, doing those assessments or using them as resources to guide your own practices. So that's where we get into, talking a little bit more about governance and kind of some of the things that I've touched on already. In addition to that, peace of mind. Everybody, you see the articles of different breaches or whatever it may be. Everybody says it's hard to sleep at night when there are all these different attack types out there and, new things popping up all the time. Peace of mind, really, you're doing assessments to find out whether your security's already been compromised. I can't tell you how many assessments we've done and we've already found, signs of compromise, or just some things left behind from a previous compromise. These are the type of things that, unless you're looking, you're not going to find out. One of the other things is very obvious, staying on top of the latest security threats since the new attacks come out pretty much daily, if not more so. Even if nothing has changed in your environment, a lot of times what you see is that new attacks come out, vulnerabilities for older technologies that maybe are forgotten about come out. You need to stay on top of that type of thing. Also, just increasing awareness and understanding of security issues throughout the company. So one of the great things about assessments is that when you're done with them or when we're done with them or, whoever might be doing them, whether they're self or independent assessments, is that you actually have something to show somebody. So the vulnerabilities that come out of that, if you're doing a root cause analysis on why a vulnerability has popped up, that's something that may require approval, may require a little bit of an executive buy-in, but it's something with that report or just the assessment output that you can take to your executive management and show you that, you're actually doing this type of stuff, your staff is being vigilant, just increasing the awareness of the security issues that are, posed in your environment and the type of stuff that you're trying to do with them. And then that kind of lends to one of the last things that I like to talk about, which is it helps you build confidence that you're making smart security investments because you can prioritize and focus on high importance, high payoff items. So instead of just kind of running around and following trends or buzzword type security solutions or whatever they may be, you actually have an assessment to be able to go back to and show why you need funding for a particular item or why you need to make changes, why a new process needs to be put in place, or why FTE resources need to be allocated to do specific things. And then one of the last things, one of the major bullet points here, one of the last major bullet points here, is the notion of customer facing, doing security assessments to basically make a market differentiator for your company, or demonstrate to your customers that security is important to you, and show them you actually care about their data. Now, a lot of people do have security policies and privacy policies out there, but I really truly believe that we're at the point now in our industry that we need to be a little bit more proactive about this stuff. So instead of just saying, yes, we adhere to best practices, or yes, we have this privacy policy and this is exactly what we do, there's this notion of having more of an external type statement where you can go out and proactively talk to your partners and even your customers if you're in a customer-facing type organization, and show them that the differentiator between you and a competitor is that you actually care. And this is some of the stuff that you're doing in your organization, whether it be regular technical assessments, compliance type frameworks, or whatever it may be. But brag about it. Go out and actually make sure that people know what you're doing, and be a little bit more transparent about that. And I know a lot of people are scared to do that initially, but the benefits are tremendous when you go out, just because, like I said, it is a lot of a market differentiator to show that you're doing these things that other people might not be doing, or at least you're able to sit out there and say that you're doing these things and feel comfortable about it. So the next slide gets into how you make security assessments part of your security program. I kind of talk about maturity and assessments. One of the things I like to talk about is in a new organization, or even an organization where the security program is a little bit new, or you're just trying to start out as far as building something, have a realistic start. Obviously you're not going to jump in, try to do 10 different assessments, whether they be vulnerability assessments or pen tests or whatever. a lot of times, and this is just more anecdotal than anything, but we get engaged because people want to do pen tests. And pen tests seem to be the sexy item that everybody kind of knows and understands what they are. In reality, a lot of times when we engage people, they haven't done any security assessments yet. So unfortunately, doing a pen test really isn't going to be of value to them. So instead, we like to kind of point people in the direction of doing more of a vulnerability assessment or something a little bit more broad. And then when they've made those decisions and have actually worked through some of the vulnerabilities, whether they be technical or more organizational, we come back and do that pen test more as like a final exam. Making sure that they've actually done what they needed to do. So the point here is, like I said, have a realistic start. Know that you're not going to conquer the world in one day, but instead, you're going to build that security program. One of the most important things is to just have a vision and a way to get there. So there aren't many people in the industry or many bosses, whether it be you're reporting into a CIO or an IT director, whatever the reporting relationship is. But there aren't many people that will fault you for, kind of stepping back and being realistic with the resources that you have in place and saying, we're not going to conquer everything this year or today or this month or this quarter, whatever it may be. My vision is to grow this throughout the next 3 years and, potentially put us in a better position where we're in compliance with these specific regulations. We're meeting these industry standards, and as far as technology is concerned, we have a very good understanding of what our risk posture is. So this is something that, again, feel pretty strongly about, having a vision and just showing a way to get there, but then also articulating and gaining approval for that overall security strategy. Now, this is going to come in a lot of different ways, but if you pull people in and are asking people what they need to see from you, this is where a lot of people will be candid. They may tell you that the security posture isn't necessarily candid. They need to know more about specific technologies or how they're protected in a certain way. And this is where you can really work to become a trusted advisor with those people. Obviously, when we talk about building your security program or your security organization, compliance can be a major factor as far as being a driver. A lot of people started out, or a lot of people really focused on PCI, state data breaches, or the breach laws were very big as far as being a motivating factor. But then also, as far as compliance goes, think about some of the, more mundane things that you probably deal with. Things like internal audit, where you may be audited regularly for SOX. Working in and putting controls in place that show that you're in compliance with not only SOX, but the other controls that management needs to see and actually be comfortable with. The other thing to point out here when we even talk about compliance is being part of larger entities. So if you're a subsidiary, you may have a larger entity that's overseeing your technical operations or just needs to know exactly what you're doing, and they may have their own framework in place. So being compliant in those factors is also something that can really drive building out these security assessments and doing them regularly, and again building that security organization. Some of the other things that we always like to touch on, and I think this is more pointers for how to get started as far as doing your own or independent assessments, are new projects. So a lot of times there's great opportunities for people to get involved. Be opportunistic with the kinds of things that your company is doing, even if you don't think there's necessarily a direct line or a direct nexus to information security. Get involved. Try to understand what people are doing. Worst case scenario, you're involved, you get to know the business a little bit more and understand functions beyond your current skill set. Best scenario is that it's something that does require your expertise, and again, that's working towards becoming that trusted advisor. You're involved, opportunistic with the project that's going on, and sometimes funding comes out of that as far as security assessment. So a lot of times what happens is people think that they need to drive all of their assessments with their own budget, and very often what we see is that once people are ingrained in an organization and get involved in new projects or new initiatives, they find that a lot of these things can be run right in with the actual projects that are taking place. And it's usually a lot easier. The approval process is a lot easier to get these things done. Whether that's, again, buying tools for yourself to do independent assessments, or for yourself to do self-assessments, or paying for an outside firm to do independent assessments. The other thing here, and this is kind of tricky when we get into this area, is leveraging incidents. So obviously, if a breach happens to your company, it's going to be something that gets upper management's attention. But one of the things that we like to talk about is not only your own breaches, but other people's breaches. So if you get regular headlines, there's tons of resources out there as far as things that, things that are going on right now in the industry, whether it's specific industry events that you're trying to look through, say the financial industry or the healthcare industry, or just in general breaches that are going on. This is something that you should regularly put in front of senior management, whether it's your direct senior management or a little bit higher up, or even just collecting statistics to be able to show how many breaches have occurred in the industry or how many breaches have occurred overall. It helps get the point across. Again, it's just being opportunistic with that, with that particular breach that either you have or other people have. And of course, we all know beautiful FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt that can come along with our wonderful industry. We try to stay away from this one as much as possible, just because there's too much of it that goes on. I think a lot of it gets into marketing hype with other companies, whether it be service providers or software providers or hardware providers, or the people that like to say they do everything. But it does help sometimes. I know a lot of people play off that at least it gets the interest of some of the people that you're talking to. I wouldn't rely on this one too much, just because I think it puts you in sort of like a Chicken Little position where you're constantly screaming that the sky is falling and you need certain types of things or assessments or whatever it may be. Again, going back to that market differentiator, I think this is a huge one that people need to exploit a little bit more. See what your competition's doing. You can probably do it more securely, and then you can brag about it. So, if your competition is saying that they're great, they do all this stuff wonderfully, and, they have this beautiful privacy policy on their site that doesn't really mean anything, put something, up them. Do something a little bit as far as like an external statement and show them the lengths and the detail that you're willing to go to prove that your security is better than theirs. I think this is a huge opportunity for a lot of companies, and I hope this is something that people start taking advantage of. And then the last thing, as far as really trying to drive security assessments and grow your maturity, is metrics. Everyone's done metrics. Most times the executive's biggest complaint is that they don't know the true security posture of the company. And they kind of think if they're not in the headlines, they're okay. And we all know that's not the case. So get down to the point where you're engaging with senior management and actually understand what kind of risk profile they're willing to accept. Really drive those metrics towards that. You may be surprised at how interested people get once you show even something as simple as vulnerabilities after your self-vulnerability scans on a quarterly basis, or audit findings after a SOX audit, whatever it may be. So do the quarter over quarter, the year over year, whatever comparisons you need to have to actually show, number one, that your vision and your articulated way to get your security strategy out there is working. But capture their attention with that information. Really make them think about what's going on, and how they need to think about security going forward. Really show them what you're doing to bolster the company. So you're probably thinking at this time, well, that's all great and good because BTB Security sells security assessments, and that's one of those things. It's what do I do? Do I need to do it all myself, or do I need to call BTB for everything? Well, yeah, you can call us for everything if you really want, but I think one of the things that I always like to say is that security assessments and really building out your own security program when it comes to assessments is kind of like a car, right? So you get the service manual in your car, and I know even myself, 10 years ago, I had a pretty simple car, changed the oil, rotate the tires. I pretty much bought the service manual for every car I had and tried to do the most just so I didn't have to pay a mechanic. Now, sometimes I failed, sometimes I may have done some things weird, but I always knew when I was out of my league or needed a little bit of help. So it's kind of like the same thing, right? How much can you do? How much do you want to do? If you actually have the right tools to do that, and you have the time or resources to actually make that happen. And that's the big one, it seems, right now. It's just, do you have the time to take care of that? With a lot of the new things that are being introduced to the infrastructure, do you have the expertise to actually go through, and do you have the, FTEs or even part-time contractors to come in and do what you need to do? And a lot of people are struggling for this because security is still a really hard area to hire in. People's expectations are very high when they're being hired into a security position. And honestly, even employees are being asked to do a lot more, have a very large skill set. So it's something to think about. We're not saying that you can't do self-assessments, but again, going back to that car analogy, taking on what you can or want to do, having the right tools and just making sure you have the right time. As far as people doing independent security assessments, obviously, this is kind of our sweet spot. But we like to work with people and make sure that they're doing the right thing for their own organization as far as self-assessments and try to help people be a little bit more self-sufficient where they can and where they can save some money doing that. But then also there are reasons to do independent assessments. Things like the validity of work, having that trusted advisor that not only you trust, but then also the executive management or your senior management understands as being well-credentialed, having multiple touch points for industry experience and bringing some of their own experience in to actually work with you. Besides that, a lot of times independent advisors or trusted advisors, security consultants bring knowledge of specific technologies, like I said before, industry trends or new techniques that might not be easy to learn. Quite honestly, there's good times and bad times to bring in, security assessors. If you feel that you can do it on your own, your company, some of the intricacies in it, a self-assessment is great. And if you can handle it and actually, have the time to do it and have the right stuff to put it in place, that's great because, it's a great way to build your internal security organization without spending tons of money. But it also gives you some peace of mind over what you're doing. The independence, a thing like a pen test, every once in a while we'll run into a client that says, well, we do our own pen tests. And that's great because you should be checking, you should be doing a real life check of your security. But at the same time, are those tests really independent? You know what the technology infrastructure looks like. You know what the landscape of the entire place looks like. Are you really getting a true look at, what's going on out there? Or do you know that, if you just get onto this one machine, you can jump to a segment that gives you access to customer data or specific resources? So that's the type of stuff where we get into conversations with a lot of clients and say, this may be a good opportunity for you to use an independent assessor. Whether it's us or whether it's somebody else, you probably shouldn't be doing this stuff on your own. And then there's also the hybrid approach. We run into these pretty frequently anymore. A lot of people do some of their own and then have us come in more of like a general or, governance type assessment where we look at what they're doing regularly, whether it be, things like one of the things that we see most common is web application assessments. So people come in, since they have so many web applications or they're doing them or changing them so rapidly, they're doing their own. So they may have bought a tool. We know a lot of these tools are now automated, a little bit easier to use now. They're doing their own scanning for a web application. We come in, we may be doing more of a compliance-based assessment, but it's something that we talk about. We obviously are interested in sort of the overall picture, so we ask them about what regular type of security assessments that we're doing. when we look at that stuff, it's not only, it's not like an audit where we're saying, are you doing that? But, okay, you're doing that. Can we see the output and sort of the methodology that you've put in place? And we honestly like to sit down and figure out, number one, if they're doing anything different that we haven't thought of, or if they're doing something, using a tool that may be homegrown or very specific for their need. And just to kind of check up and say, okay, we put value in the work that you've done. We can kind of sign off on that. And we understand that you're doing those web app assessments. We're fine with it. We kind of move on. So it's kind of that oversight on the self-assessments. But again, I think there's a good mix of self-assessments and independent assessments. It's just really, sort of tailored to your own organization, what kind of resources you have and what your appetite is for some of that stuff. Also, going back to compliance, will an auditor, if they come in, will a SOX auditor accept a self-penetration test? I know, specifically for PCI, that's not going to fly. So, again, it's that good mix that you're trying to accomplish. And then one of the last things, obviously, how often to assess. Now, this isn't comprehensive. We actually have something out on our website that we've tried to build to be a little bit more comprehensive. But you can see that, that mix there. And this is something that, we have several things on here as far as, some of our services and some of the things that you should be doing as yourself. And you can see, you can do a lot of this stuff yourself, but it's also something that, you can farm out to an independent assessment company. I think, again, I can't stress it enough. I think there's a good mix of doing these yourself and having an independent assessment company come in. If you want to see that comprehensive list, it's out on our website. The blog post was dated 9/19, so it's not that old. And actually, we're going to be putting something together a little bit more marketing friendly, I'll say, that really talks more about, the Defensible Security program. This is really something that we're driving. Defensible Security program, and not only this, but some of the other things that should be wrapped into that. And obviously, we've got to give you a little bit of a marketing spiel, especially since you hung on the presentation for a little over 30 minutes. This is the stuff that we do. So, obviously we can help you with assessment services, even advisory services, and kind of going over, what you've done as far as self-assessments. And the big difference as far as BTB is concerned is that we do pride ourselves in listening to what your concerns are and creating, whatever custom services or solutions that we can come up with. We're not going to tell you a lot of times, what you want to hear, but we'll tell you what you absolutely need to hear when we're in your best interest as far as your security. We're not snake oil salesmen. We're not going to sell you something that you don't need. Like I said, we get a lot of requests for people that want pen tests, and, I would say probably 30% of the time after talking to them, a pen test isn't what you need. We know it could be an easy sale, but, they haven't even taken a look at their security posture to figure out where they need to start. So this is obviously, like I said, something that we're pretty passionate about. It's more of a consultative type session when you engage with us, just to get upfront what you need to be doing, how you've built your program, and where we might be able to fit in to be that trusted independent advisor that you can go to, just kind of pick up the phone and ask, what our interest or what our opinion is on new topics or whatever it may be. And with that, that's kind of the wrap of the webinar. I don't know if anybody specifically has questions. If you want to, send them to me via the chat window. I can kind of read them back and then make sure that everybody understands them. Again, I think everyone has my email address at this point. It should have gone out with the actual invites. If you have any questions for me, again, it's Ron Schlecht, ron.schlecht@btbsecurity.com. You can go to our website, browse some of the stuff that we do. With that, I'll just wait a couple minutes on the line to see if anybody has any questions, and then we'll go ahead and wrap this up. But I hope it was informational for everybody. There's a lot of statistics that will be out on our website soon as far as, this is independent research as far as how many people are using security services, what their actual spendings are. percentages that people are increasing their spending by on a yearly basis, stuff that may actually help as far as doing independent assessments or even self-assessments and trying to reinvest in their own tool set. All right, like I said, I will stay on the line for another minute or two, see if there are any questions, and after that, go ahead and close out the session. But I want to thank everybody for the time today. And like I said, I hope to speak to you at some point. If you have any questions, just let me know. All right, since we don't have any questions, it's been a couple minutes. I got a couple chat messages for other things, but since we don't have any questions, I'm just going to go ahead and end the event. And thank everyone again for coming, taking the time out of their day to do this. We do these webinars regularly, try to make them actually informative as opposed to just trying to sell you something. So I hope everyone enjoyed it. And again, thank you for coming.